right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we're not doing that. It's one of our annual midway through the year top 10 so far lists. And that means that Josh Bell from Awesome Movie Year is back with us, and we're going to get into a whole bunch of movies that we loved this year. We're also going to get into some picks from the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group, which, by the way, if you're not a member of, the other social media sites have been just absolutely nosediving lately, but you should join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, and get in on the conversation over there. But if the other social media sites are working, you should follow us over there too, at Piecing Pod. And of course, make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Before we get into the conversation, I do want to remind you that we do have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, which includes bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, that's Josh's podcast, and from my music career. And right now there's a bunch of advanced episodes of Piecing It Together you can get in there. And I'll be releasing a special exclusive film score in there in a week from now, week or two, something like that. But it's coming this month. So you should, if you're interested in getting some advanced and exclusive content, check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. So with that said, let's get into our top 10 so far of 2023. It's that time again. Josh Bell is with us to talk about our favorite movies at the midway point. It's 2023 so far. Josh, how you doing? I am doing great. Busy as always, but happy to be talking to you about some of our favorite movies. We get to reminisce on the year that's been so far.
Yeah, it's been a little disappointing to me, I think.
Yeah.
I feel like in the past few years, we've done these episodes and I've had a lot of enthusiasm for a lot of movies that have ended up kind of holding their places in my list all the way through to the end of the year. And some of those this time maybe will, but I feel like I had more of a struggle to come up with a list for this than I have in past years. And maybe I just haven't been seeing the right movies.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like my list, and we'll, get into it as we're going through, seems to strangely be filled with a lot of just ridiculous, over-the-top action comedy, like mainstream, populist, just, that kind of stuff. So whether or not that's all going to hang around by the end of the year is, really up for debate. But, that being said, I've really enjoyed these movies that are on my list, and I can easily go into a top 20. That's how much I've found a lot that I've liked, but it's been a certain kind of like, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed these movies. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm going to recommend a bunch of movies that I don't really recommend, but I think this was testing the limits of how many movies I really did enjoy that much thus far this year. So
fair enough. Well, we'll also get into some honorable mentions at the end and also mention some picks from the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group. But let's get into our list. What do you have for number 10?
All right, so my number 10 pick is a Chinese film called Are You Lonesome Tonight? It's a sort of noir-ish story, I guess you could say, about this man who gets himself embroiled in a very complicated underworld sort of, I guess he's sort of in like the crossfire of these people fighting with each other, and in this noir sense. But the core of it is this guy who accidentally, or believes that he has accidentally hit and killed someone with his car, and he runs away from the scene of the crime, and then he feels guilty, and he ends up befriending the widow of the woman or of the man that he killed without her knowledge. And so it's got that kind of dynamic to it. But in the meantime, the man that he believed that he killed was involved in some sort of shady crime dealings, and the people who that guy was connected with are after this guy. But it's got a lot of cool atmosphere. It sounds kind of confusing, and it is kind of confusing, but it's an interesting combination of that kind of noir style and something sort of woozy and romantic, almost like a Wong Kar-wai movie. And it's not exactly a romance between these main characters, between the main guy and the widow, but they do have this emotional connection. So it's takes place over a long period of time, and it kind of goes in a bunch of directions you wouldn't necessarily expect, but it always keeps your interest, and it looks really cool. So Are You Lonesome Tonight is what it's called, and it does feature that Elvis song performed on karaoke by somebody as well.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it sounds interesting. I don't know much about this film, and it definitely sounds like very twisty and very I don't know, kind of like weird and mysterious and whatnot. And so yeah, it sounds like one worth checking out when I get around to that. So great first pick there. I'm going to go for number 10 with something that really surprised me because I don't think that I really expected much out of it, but it's a big one this weekend, and who knows how big it's going to be. But Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is my number 10, directed by James Mangold. And of course, we'll hopefully be the final Indiana Jones movie. I mean, you never know with Hollywood and especially with Disney. But I've never been the biggest Indiana Jones fan. I like the Indiana Jones movies. I actually like the video games more than the movies, but and of course the score. But this to me was everything that I like about Indiana Jones movies. And I know the last one, Crystal Skull, has such a bad reputation. I always thought that was fine. I never thought it was bad necessarily. I thought it was kind of ridiculous, but I think the whole series is ridiculous. And it's kind of, as the series has gone on, it's just leaned into that more and more. And this one is leaning into that even more so. And it feels a lot like watching those, old 80s and 90s action adventures that everybody kind of looks at with like this nostalgic lens of like they were so perfect and pristine and everything about them was set up in exactly the right way, but really they were kind of scrappy and ridiculous too at the time. It's just we think about them through that lens. But yeah, I really had a great time with this movie and it made my list.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I think it seems like it's gotten mixed response, maybe more positive than Crystal Skull overall, but still a lot of people didn't like it. And I did. I had fun with it. I think I agree with most of what you're saying. And I'm sort of a casual fan of these movies as well. I remember thinking Crystal Skull was fine. And I think this was probably more enjoyable. But it's not on my top 10 list. But I certainly had a nice time with it. So I'm with you on that.
Right on. What do you got for number 9?
So my number 9 is a movie that we talked about here on the old Piecing It Together podcast that I know you liked a lot. So I may come up on your list later. I don't know. It's hard to predict you, Dave. But
yes, true.
It's Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool from the very, very beginning of the year, like the second week of January or something, I think was when this movie came out, right after Sundance. And it's some weird shit, but in a good way. I mean, I've had quite a Brandon Cronenberg year. We did an episode of Awesome Movie Year on Antiviral, his first film, and then I ended up watching it again a few months later to write an article about it. So I've really kind of immersed myself in his style, which of course is similar to his father, David Cronenberg, but it's got its own kind of flavor to it. And I feel like Infinity Pool, even though, yeah, it's kind of similar to his other work, it's also refining it further. It's another movie in this sort of trend of dark films about the nasty underbelly of the super overprivileged. But it takes it in this more weird, surreal sci-fi direction, which I always appreciate. Mia Goth is fantastic in this film. And, she's been on a roll lately with the stuff that she's been doing. And I love the weirdness, the body horror of it. And just the way that it completely commits to the complete insanity. And so it's a movie that has moments that will definitely stick with you as long as, for quite a while after you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, it will appear later in my list. I definitely love that movie. So I'm glad it made your list as well. I will go to my number 9, which I got to give a quick shout out though, because this was a last minute addition, a movie I watched last night. And so it knocked Mafia Mama out of the number 10 spot for me. So, so sorry to Mafia Mama.
No apologies to Mama. You know what? I wanted to have a debate about Mafia Mama though.
Well, it's my number one honorable mention.
All
so
right.
my number 11 movie.
Yeah.
But number 9, Past Lives, which I'm sure will make a lot of top 10 lists this year. Even coming to the end of the year, I'm sure it'll still be there for a lot of people. But directed by Celine Song. And, it's really pretty much as good as everybody's kind of, making it out to be. I mean, this movie is it's beautiful. It's incredibly acted. The performances are just so fantastic, and I think that what it has to say about relationships and about possibilities of relationships is really almost more interesting than what happens, the plot itself, and it's something that I feel like I'll be thinking about for a long time after watching it last night. And on all of the technical levels is like really beautifully made as well. I mean, it looks incredible. The score is fantastic, and yeah, I mean, there's really not much negative I could say about this movie. It really just kind of swept me away. And I think, not that Oscars are everything, but I mean, looking over my top 10 here, unless they create a stunts category for John Wick, this is probably the only thing for my list that has any kind of shot this year.
Chad Stahelski is working very, very hard to make that happen. So it may get there.
And it's deserved.
Yeah. So. Yeah. This is a movie that will come up later on my list. So I'll hold my further comments till then.
Sounds good. Right on. What do you have for number 8?
So my number 8 is a Shudder original film that I didn't have much expectations for. Although Shudder, I feel like as far as streaming services go, has a pretty decent record with their originals. But I thought this movie just really was very effective at what it was trying to do. It's called Influencer, from writer and director Curtis David Harder. And I think, honestly, like the two movies that I've mentioned thus far, one of the great things about this film is how it kind of keeps swerving and it keeps you on your toes. It doesn't do just what you expect it to do at all times. Cassandra No, who is the main star of this, although doesn't necessarily appear to be the main star when the movie begins. Mm-hmm. And she plays this sort of talented Mr. Ripley type figure who is living as an expat in Thailand and kind of stalking or befriending these social media influencers who come to this country to engage in these luxury travel experiences and post about them online. And she kind of adopts these identities and sort of messes with these people to a psychopathic degree. I don't want to say too much because, again, part of the enjoyment of this movie is how the plot keeps going in directions that you don't expect. But sure. I think it's really smart about this whole social media influencer world without being, I think a lot of movies, especially like horror movies or thrillers about that, would just be very heavy-handed about like, oh, this is so terrible. And it's not that way at all. It's not judgmental per se, who's the villain, but also the protagonist. And I just thought it was really clever. And I didn't quite know what to expect out of it. And it stayed with me for a long time afterwards. So it's on Shudder. It's called Influencer.
Right on. Yeah, I didn't like it as much as you did, but on my Letterboxd review, I said, as far as the talented Mr. Ripley meets Ingrid Goes West movies go, this one isn't bad. So, I had a good time with it. It's pretty good. And yeah, people that are Shudder fans should definitely check it out. So, yeah. My number 8 is also tech related, and spoiler alert for my list, but in a year with a lot of true stories of brands movies, I have 2 of them on my list. And the first one is Blackberry from director Matt Johnson, which I really did not expect much out of this movie. But man, it really was fun. It was riveting and has some great performances, mainly Glenn Howerton from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, who just is a real big surprise for this year to have like just such a powerhouse standout performance like this. And it's just a great, weird, true story that I was obviously we're of that age where we were around for all this stuff. And so it's like interesting to like kind of get further details to stuff that we kind of knew about, just, exactly how the rise and fall of BlackBerry all went down with the advent of iPhones coming in and just basically wiping the floor with them, even though they had practically 100% market share up until that point. And yeah, I mean, it's just an interesting film. And as kind of a tech nerd guy myself, like it was like really fun to kind of dig into some of the references and some of the companies that are explored in the film and all the things that, like I said, were like just outside of like my knowledge of these companies, but like to like get more details of it all was really cool.
Yeah, I wish I liked this movie.
Hmm.
Everyone likes this movie,
Yeah.
and I like literally everyone. I wrote a review of it and I posted it on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was like one of two negative reviews out of 100 or something. And at some point, Rotten Tomatoes like flipped it to positive somehow, and I had to go
They
back in and change it.
sabotaged
I don't know
you.
what happened with that. I was gonna reach out to them like it was some kind of conspiracy, but then it held. But no, I actually had high expectations because I heard such great things about this. And I think the idea, like you said, there's these brand movies that have all come out this year. And the idea of doing it in this more like darkly comedic tone to me seemed great. Like I would love something like that that's not just a boosterism for some sort of corporate, entity or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know. People talk about like Glenn Howerton's performance here. I found it so one note and so irritating, and not in a way of like, oh, how fascinating it is that this guy is a jerk, but like, please get this guy off my screen immediately. And I just like the first 40 minutes of this movie, I remember pausing it and thinking, this is just, I hate this. And then
Wow.
I kind of got a little more on its wavelength as it went along. And I appreciate the approach, but yeah, it just, I don't know. It did not work at all for me, but I seem to be basically the only one on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. Cause like, seriously, everybody else that I know seems to have like really connected with it. And, I don't know. I had such a good time with this one. So I guess it's not for everybody though.
But it seems like it almost is,
Yeah,
except for me.
exactly. What do you got for number 7?
What do I have for number 7? My number 7 pick is Rye Lane, the wonderful, really just, you want to have like a fun time at the movies and just be like smiling the entire time and feel good about humanity for a short, tiny window of time
Sure.
before you return to the real world. You can watch this film. A great debut from Rain Allen Miller, the director, and excellent performances from these two stars, David Johnson and Vivian Opara, all of whom I was not familiar with. I think these actors have done some TV work in the UK, but not people that I had seen before. And it's compared a lot to Before Sunrise because it takes place essentially over the course of a single day as these two characters kind of walk around a city. In this case, they're walking around London, which is where they live. So it's not quite the same. And they're encountering a lot of people that they know. And it's a really sort of vibrant look at this community, as well as just these two people who are kind of falling in love. It's a lot more comedic, I think, than Before Sunrise. And yet it still has those strong emotions. I mean, you really get to know these characters. You really get invested in the romance that they're building, and they're just so likable and they're just so fun to spend time with. It's also very visually inventive. It uses these fisheye lenses, which can be a bit jarring as a visual style, but I think it fits with the story, which is, it's almost like the camera is bursting to take in as much as it possibly can of this neighborhood and of these people who have these big personalities. And the locations that they go to and the costumes, the set design, it's all very colorful. And it's just, it's completely predictable. But if you like romantic comedies, it's really like the best example of how to make a good romantic comedy.
Yeah, it's great. It definitely makes my honorable mentions, and yeah, the comedy aspect is really funny. Like it's really well done. The ex's new boyfriend is so funny. What a great character! And this is a movie that came. At the end of every piecing it together, I always ask my guests, if there is a movie they want to recommend to our listeners, and this came up like 5 or 6 times, I think, this year. And so
All right.
obviously, this one is making its mark, and I think it's one that people will be talking about for a while. So yeah, great
Yeah.
pick. My number 7. So, sometimes I include these movies that are a little hard to separate from the theatrical experience that I had watching them. Maybe it's not, quite the best movie in the world, but I had so much fun watching this movie. It had to make my list, and that is Megan. From director Gerard Johnstone and writer Akilah Cooper, of course, of Malignant. But this movie, yes, is a little hampered by not having the full R rating, so it couldn't go quite Malignant style gore, in that department. but when it turns it on is so funny. And being a part of that crowd the first week of January when this came out and just laughing along as this just totally ridiculous, play on Chucky does all these just ridiculous things, and the dancing and the killing and the making little sassy quips and remarks, and when her hair gets all messed up, and it's so ridiculous. And I had so much fun watching this movie. I had to include it.
Yeah, it is a fun movie. I saw it at the drive-in, so I mean, I sort of had a theatrical experience, but you can't always judge the reactions of other people from that.
Sure. Yeah.
But I had fun with it. I love Megan herself as a horror villain and horror icon. I mean, shout out to those actors whose names I'm not familiar with, but there were there's a voice actor and then there was
Sure.
a movement actor, and both of them are excellent, and they kind of combine to really make that character work. I know there's the unrated version is streaming on Peacock, so it's possible that that's makes up for some shortcomings there that you're mentioning, but I haven't actually bothered to watch it again.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance either, but from what I hear, it's just all a couple drops here and there. But
Uh,
one of these days, I'm gonna give it a rewatch and see though in that unrated version for sure.
yeah.
But what do you got for number 6?
So my number 6 is, I'm pretty sure, the most obscure thing that I'm going to pick. And this is, on the one hand, evidence of my efforts to stretch to fill the list. But on the other hand, this is a really good movie that I feel like more people should watch. And it's a movie starring Casper Van Dien. I never would have thought that Casper Van Dien would make my top 10 list, but it's
Wow.
called Daughter. And it is a fascinating, really unsettling, I suppose you would call it a horror movie, but it's almost at times like a domestic drama. And you don't entirely know what the situation is, but Casper Van Dien plays the patriarch of this family that is also possibly sort of a cult and is apocalyptic in a way. And it's one of these movies where the character says something is true. It actually reminds me of a movie that I know you like a lot, which is 10 Cloverfield Lane, where you're spending the entire time not sure if what this character claims has happened to the outside world has really happened. So Casper Van Dien is the patriarch of this family, and he says, the outside world has collapsed and is dangerous, and we must stay in our house. And this doesn't seem to really be true, but he has sort of convinced these people who he calls his family, who are really people that he's kidnapped, that this is what's going on. And in particular, he has this son who he is grooming to be what he claims is like the savior of humanity, and is like, he keeps taking his blood to process. And it's a lot of mysterious stuff that you don't entirely know what's going on, and you never entirely know. And it's from the perspective of this woman who gets kidnapped at the beginning and is now the daughter of this family, and her efforts to kind of escape and figuring out the weird worldview of this guy. And Casper Van Dien is so creepy and so scary in this film, but yet mesmerizing. Like, you can believe that he could convince these people, even if it's 100% not true, that he's right about what's going on. So it's one of these movies that you have to kind of immerse yourself in it and be just as bewildered as the characters are. But the world building is great. And it's a very low budget film. It's essentially shot just in some very nondescript house. It's not a sci-fi post-apocalyptic thing. It's just this very beige looking suburban house that they claim is the only safe place now in the world. So I didn't have any expectations going into this. I mean, a thriller starring Casper Van Dien, my expectations were probably as low as they possibly could be.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's also proof that this guy, who is a punchline, who is known for just being in these terrible B movies all the time, if given a really good role and working with a good filmmaker, Corey Deshawn is the name of the writer-director, can deliver an excellent performance. So it's a movie that I hope more people will check out. I'm sure people have not heard of it, but it's available on demand. It's called Daughter.
Yeah, I've never heard of it, like you said, and 10 Cloverfield Lane sounds like a good comparison to what you just described. I was also thinking while you were talking about Yorgos Lanthimos' Dogtooth, which
absolutely, yes,
probably a lot weirder, I would imagine. but in the
this
same
actually
vein,
comes
though.
close to how weird Dogtooth is at times. Yeah,
Nice. Well, that sounds really good. I'm gonna have to check that out. My number 6, also a little bit, off the beaten path. It's a Marvel movie called Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Marvel? I don't know what What is that?
From director James Gunn. Superhero movies have been having a little bit of a rough go lately. They either are critically not working out or box office wise or both. And I definitely have not liked a lot of them. But this has definitely been the shining standout of all the different companies putting out superhero movies. This really kind of recaptured exactly what there is to have fun with these movies, and is like a perfect conclusion to the trilogy of Guardians of the Galaxy films, which I felt too was not quite as good as the first one. I think this is right back like on par with the first one, and with the MCU kind of in a free fall at the moment, like the rest of their films just haven't felt like they were like doing anything necessarily worthwhile. This one gives you all the laughs, the action, the effects, just all the superhero stuff that you want to see in one of these movies. He really kind of brought it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fine. I didn't get to that level of enjoyment. I know my awesome movie year co-host Jason Harris also liked this, I think, as much as you did, and I like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I like the previous ones. I agree the second one wasn't quite as good as the first one, but I don't know. I guess I just felt like he's done this shtick now 3 times, and it's kind of all the same. And the level of sentimentality on in these movies, I think, just kind of got to me after a while.
It is very sentimental. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do have a question before we go to the next one. Is there a superhero movie you liked more this year?
Yes. But I mean, I could put in my honorable mentions.
Oh, okay. So, didn't make your top 10, but honorable mentions maybe.
No superhero movies in my top 10. Mm-hmm. And I think in general, even if I throw this one in my honorable mentions, it was like, yeah, it was fun. But I mean, I could do with I grew up reading superhero comics. I was like a massive superhero fan my entire childhood. And at this point, I was like, if they made no superhero movies for the next decade, I'd be fine with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what do you got for number 5?
So my number 5 is the kind of movie that I typically have no interest in, but I'm glad that I ended up watching this. It's a, celebrity bio documentary, still a Michael J. Fox movie, which is an Apple TV Plus original. And, so many of these movies are really just, here's this famous person and how great they are, and they're not really creative in any way cinematically. And if you're a fan of the person, you might enjoy it, but otherwise there's really no reason for anyone to watch it. And I kind of imagine that might be the same thing here. And in a way it is, certainly. It's definitely not a movie that is like challenging your perceptions about who Michael J. Fox is per se. But the way that this movie is put together by director Davis Guggenheim is, to me, really remarkable and something that I at least had not seen in other documentaries like this. And we have, of course, we have these interviews with Michael J. Fox, and we have some scenes, sort of candid scenes of him in his life. And, he deals with Parkinson's disease, which he's been dealing with for the past 30 years. But as he recounts his life story, I mean, they starting way back in his childhood and going through his career and his dealing with this disease. And they show clips from all of his work, his TV shows and his films, and not just in a typical way where he says, oh, then I was on Family Ties and here's a clip from Family Ties. But they use it almost to recontextualize these clips and make them tell the story that he's telling. So instead of Family Ties demonstrating how he was on Family Ties, it's a clip from Family Ties or a clip from one of his movies that manages to illustrate the things that he was doing in his life. And it was just a really fascinating, to me, way of telling this story that I had not seen before. And it makes you see these films, if you've seen Back to the Future or you watch Family Ties or some of these really, really famous things that he's done, it makes you look at them in a completely new light and through the lens of what was going on in his personal life and the things that he was struggling with, especially early on with his Parkinson's diagnosis and trying to hide that. And then as he was struggling with addiction and all this stuff. So it's just, I feel like these movies are often just like, this could be a news magazine or something. And this was a very, very cinematic portrayal of this kind of thing. So even if you feel like, hey, I've read about Michael J. Fox, I know what his whole deal is, this is a movie that's worth watching as a movie on Apple TV, still a Michael J. Fox movie.
Right on. Yeah, I haven't watched it yet. It's definitely on my list of things that I've been wanting to get around to. And, I hadn't even thought about looking at my list of documentaries that I've seen this year. I might have included Jason Isbell Running with Our Eyes Closed if I had, which was a fantastic documentary. But yeah, no docs on my list though this year so far. But we'll see at the end of the year maybe.
Yeah, I usually don't end up. I mean, I'm sort of a casual documentary viewer at best, but certain
Yeah.
ones like this, they just grab me, and it really did.
Right on. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Number 5 on my list. I don't care what anyone says. I loved it. It's a little movie called Fast X. The latest.
Fast 10, Dave. Don't mispronounce it.
Fast 10, whatever. It's from director Louis Leterrier, and it's just absolutely just nonsense ridiculous. So much fun. Of course, this series can't get any more ridiculous, but they keep trying. But the thing that makes this one stand out from, if you're somebody who's kind of on the fence and had kind of given up on these movies because they got so ridiculous, the thing that brings it all home is Jason Momoa, who is one of the most fun villains I've seen in a movie in recent years. Just completely unhinged, totally going for it with just absolute insanity. And there's a scene where he is just sitting with a couple of corpses and painting their toenails and just talking to them. And the fact that made it into a $200 million movie, I don't even know how that's possible. I threw up my hands in the theater and said, what the fuck is happening right now? And that's what I go to the movies for.
Okay.
Josh could not handle Fast 10.
No, I like, and my feeling on these movies is always bewilderment because the sort of trajectory of the response has been dismissal, and then suddenly they became critically acclaimed somewhere in the middle, and now I feel like they've fallen off. And to me, they're all just the same level of garbage, and I don't really understand the distinction between the good ones and the bad ones. I've seen almost all of them, and I don't like any of them. Yeah, Jason Momoa was fine, I guess, in this. I mean, he's trying to bring something different. But I feel like people, especially that scene with the corpses, I've seen like social media posts about like, oh my God, you'll never believe it. Like people are way overstating how like crazy and, awesome that scene is or whatever.
Oh, I lost it in the theater. I was so just in on that. It's so ridiculous. But yeah, I do agree. It's difficult, I would say, for an outsider looking in to understand what the good ones are versus the bad ones.
I mean, and just like Momoa aside, every terrible, stupid thing that these movies do is on display in this movie to like an even greater degree. I mean, the way that they turn the bad guys into their friends, like what they do with John Cena's character in this movie is just like an unforgivable, like screenwriting atrocity.
See? And what you just said, that's why this is a good one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's leave it there then, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. What do you got for number 4?
So my number 4 is Past Lives. As you brought up earlier, Celine Song's romantic drama. Greta Lee, come on. This has got to be a Best Actress top contender here in this film. And this is a movie that I think has been so highly acclaimed since it's been playing at festivals that I went into with like super high expectations. And it's such a small scale story that I feel like it doesn't benefit from these expectations that we're now, helping to, increase. But I mean, it is just this story about 3 people and their relationships, romantic relationships, but also, their history, the childhood friendship and all this stuff. And it's done in a very understated way. And I think this was a movie that at first I was sort of like, not fully drawn into it, even though it was good. It didn't sort of wow me. And I think part of it is the cumulative power of it that you get to the end of the movie and all of the dynamics of what has happened and the way she structures the story has kind of come together.
Yeah.
For me, it really reached me fully. There's a scene with Greta Lee's character and John Magaro, who is her husband, and they're in bed together and they're kind of discussing the strange situation they've ended up in with her childhood sort of first love who's come back to visit. And it's just such an honest, open discussion, and the kind of thing I feel like you don't see in these kinds of movies that have quote unquote love triangles, that you would just have these characters like lying to each other or pretending that they don't feel what they feel. And that moment, I was just like blown away by how well it's written, how well it's acted. And it's just them lying in a bed. It's not shot in any sort of amazing way, although this movie does look beautiful.
Sure.
But the way the performances are, it really reaches you. And I think it's been compared a million times to the Before movies. and to go back to Rye Lane.
Sure.
And I think this is more in line with those movies than Rye Lane is, that if you like films like that are really, I love the theme of regret. To me, I'm going to be more drawn into a movie that's about a relationship that didn't happen than about a relationship that did. Cause I feel like, I don't know, that emotion for whatever reason speaks to me more. So if that's something that really like hits you with those before movies, I think this movie will really hit you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure as more and more people keep finding it, everybody is going to be loving this film. So yeah, I'm not surprised it made both of our lists. Number 4 for me, I said I had another one of these true stories of brands on my list, and it is Tetris from director John S. Baird. Now, I try not to get into the whole nostalgia game when it comes to movies. Everybody is just completely ruled by Star Wars and superheroes and Ghostbusters or whatever. But when it comes to Nintendo and Game Boy and Tetris, I mean, that's my nostalgia. And this tapped in 1000% to everything I lived through when I was like 9 years old when the Game Boy came out, and it just like imprinted on me and became like the most important thing in the world. And I was a regular reader of every single video game magazine, Nintendo Power, Game Pro, Electronic Gaming Monthly. So I knew like little sidebar bits about some of this stuff. But the true story is so crazy. And of course, it's, dramatized a little bit here and there, especially when things go 8-bit and insane. But, it's just such a fun, ridiculous story. And Taron Egerton is great in the lead here, as is the rest of the cast. And one of my favorite scores of the year from Lauren Bacall. Really great stuff all around. And as a video game fan, just total memory lane here.
Yeah, I didn't see this one, actually. I think I maybe had enough of the brand movies, and the reviews on this were a bit mixed. Yeah. But I mean, I was curious too. And I think it was also partly, I think the week that it came out, I just was busy and there were other new movies. And so I didn't get to it. And then it falls by the wayside. But I'm not a video game person, but I briefly was during exactly this period. Like I did have the Game Boy and I love playing Tetris. And that's the kind of game I still like, those puzzle type games. I can't get into long quests or games that take, 15, 30, whatever hours to finish and have very detailed story. But, just a little like move the block over here that I can do. So I maybe would enjoy this. And I did even read some of those magazines. I had a letter printed in the Sega magazine. I can't remember what it was called now, but I still have that magazine somewhere. And the t-shirt they sent me.
Oh, that's awesome.
So maybe I would enjoy this. I don't know, but I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
Right on. Well, I look forward to hearing what you think if you do get around to it. But what do you got for number 3?
Well, my number 3 is a movie that I know that you didn't care for. It's Nicole Holofcener's You Hurt My Feelings with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Tobias Menzies, Michaela Watkins, who's a super underrated actor, I think. And I love Nicole Holofcener. I wish she made movies more often. I'm sure she'd like to. I'm sure it's not always easy for her to get funding for her kinds of films, which are stories about just normal people doing normal stuff. And not a lot seems to happen in these films. But this is maybe the most one of that. I don't know. I mean, the sort of inciting incident of this film is so minor.
Right.
And as much as it like means something to the characters, even the characters don't like obsess over it as much as you would imagine for a movie that is theoretically about this incident, where Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character overhears her husband, Tobias Menzies, say that she's a writer and she's been struggling with this new book that she's writing, and he's read all of these drafts and has encouraged her. And he mentions to his friend that he actually didn't like her book and he lied to her about that. And it's this white lie to reassure her because he loves her and he wants her to succeed. And this kind of sends her into a tailspin a bit, but not to the degree. I feel like you could make a version of this movie that was sort of a Curb Your Enthusiasm comedy where she just goes completely insane over this small little white lie or whatever. And that's not what it is. But I feel like that's what I like about it, is that it's a more realistic response. And it's about these people who do love each other. It's not like it destroys their marriage or something. It is a small issue that they need to address that helps them to understand each other better. And it's part of one plot in this movie that's also about Michaela Watkins as Julia Louis-Dreyfus's sister, and her relationship, her husband, who's an actor and has some of these similar kinds of insecurities that Julia Louis-Dreyfus has. It's about their relationship with their son, and just a lot of really real feeling kinds of stories about middle-aged people and what they deal with. And I love that about all of her films. I think if you like any of her other movies, this is another one to really like. She works so well with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And again, I just hope she makes more movies and they make more movies together.
Yeah, I didn't hate it. You mentioned with Past Lives, like the problem with the overhype of some of these films, and I think in the lead up to this movie, a lot of the reactions were like this. You hurt my feelings is just laugh out loud hilarious, and I'm like, this is like a light chuckle, like at best, and so I think maybe expectations going into it just weren't exactly right. But Michaela Watkins is awesome, and so I can definitely agree with you on that part.
Yeah, and I agree with you that it's not a laugh out loud movie. I mean, I didn't have a problem with that. I don't think it's trying to be. I don't think it's a movie with a bunch of big jokes that fall flat.
Yeah.
I think it's a movie with a lot of gentle humor that succeeds. But if you are looking for like some sort of Curb Your Enthusiasm or some Will Ferrell comedy or something, you definitely will not get that out of this movie.
Absolutely. My number 3, also a comedy, one that I am in the vast minority on, but I love this movie. It is Fool's Paradise from director Charlie Day of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia fame. And yeah, I was just absolutely blown away by this. I don't know that I really expected anything out of it. And it's pretty clearly from the trailers, it's Being There meets Bowfinger, and it doesn't really do that much more than that. But what it does do is it recaptures the vibe of those weird comedies that we used to love when we were in like our 20s. I mean, I'm not talking to you about you specifically, Josh. You were probably watching some weird foreign films or something. But me and my buddies were all just, getting drunk and watching these just insane comedies. Things like Pootie Tang, things like Kung Pao, like the most out there, ridiculous movies that you're like, I can't believe a studio gave these people money to make this. That's the feeling I got out of Fool's Paradise. And whenever I just am going through my day since this movie came out, and I like think about Ken Jeong just being so pitiful in this movie, and I usually don't really like him, but he is so funny here. Charlie Day is ridiculous here. All of the supporting actors, Adrian Brody is just maybe the best I've ever seen him in a comedy. I just start cracking up laughing just thinking about this, and I feel like this is like maybe the movie on this list that I will rewatch the most over the years to come.
Yeah, I haven't seen this movie, and it didn't seem like a movie that I wanted to see. Like you said, the overall reaction to this movie was quite negative.
Yeah.
But maybe it's something for me to check out. I don't know. I like Charlie Day. I got so sick of Sunny in Philadelphia like long ago, and it somehow continues to exist. But I mean, as a general presence, I find him enjoyable. So, maybe I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, I would love to hear what you think about it if you do ever get to it. But what do you got for number 2?
So my number 2 pick is another film that we have done an episode here on Piecing It Together about, and that is Sanctuary, the excellent sort of two-hander with Margaret Qualley and Christopher Abbott. I know I just was like, Greta Lee, top contender, best actress, but I think I put Margaret Qualley above her, actually.
Nice.
She's so good. I mean, both of them are fantastic. They both deserve accolades, but she's so good in this film. As a very tricky character to play. I think a character who sort of seems like one thing at first, and then is not only you're learning more about her and she's revealing more about herself, but she's also sort of obscuring things about herself. And, it's the whole movie is this dance between these two characters as they are wary about revealing their true feelings, and they're sort of trying to manipulate each other, but they're also sort of trying to get to truths about each other, which is kind of where you get to by the end of the film. And it's a really tough balance, I think, for these actors to pull off. And they both do really well. Margaret Qualley has the more sort of showy performance, I think, as this dominatrix who is being let go, is being fired by her client, played by Christopher Abbott, who is this very, very wealthy hotel heir and has decided now that he's going to take over his family's company, that he can't be a guy who sees a dominatrix anymore. And she has some unorthodox ways to convince him to
Hmm.
change his mind. And it's just these two characters in a hotel room the entire time. But it's funny, it's thrilling, it's really actually quite romantic and very sex positive. And I think, like a few of these other movies that I mentioned, another great thing is it never does what you expect it to do at any point leading up all the way till like the very last shot. And that's, I think, what I loved about it as well. So I think a lot of people have been touting this movie, but it definitely deserves even more attention. I don't know if it's streaming yet, but I'm sure it will be soon. So Sanctuary.
Yeah, great movie. I loved it too. It didn't quite make my list. It's like just below my top 10, but yeah, I thought it was excellent, and I agree. Margaret Qualley's performance is fantastic, as is Christopher Abbott. So yeah, great pick, and I'm glad you brought it up on the list. My number two is Infinity Pool, which you brought up earlier. And to be honest, my number two and number one are fairly interchangeable because it really just depends on the the vibe I'm going for at the moment. Like they couldn't be further from each other. So anyway, Infinity Pool, like you talked about, I mean, it is kind of like right in line with the stuff that Brandon Cronenberg has already been doing. He's not exactly stretching himself into new areas, but he really is refining a vision. And I mean, you could kind of say the same for a good chunk of his father's career up until, the later period. And I think that what he's doing is really interesting, really exciting. It's definitely his own thing. And we talked about an awesome movie here. I love all three of his movies so far. Like I am fully on board the Brandon Cronenberg train. And, this is one that I think I haven't stopped thinking about since it came out. I think that there are so many layers to it. I think you can, of course, just talk about Mia Goth all day, but, you could talk about all the fucked up, weird clone stuff that's going on. But I think there's so many other things to get into with this film. And it is just a true vision of weird sci-fi, and that's what we want from the Cronenberg names. So, and the other thing I would mention, the Tim Hecker score, totally top of the list so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on all that stuff. And I have liked all of his movies, Possessor, the other one, in between this and Antiviral, and looking forward to seeing what he does next. And his sister, Caitlin Cronenberg, is making a movie, and
Yeah.
I'm all on board for that too. Why not? Let's get
I'm
them
sure
all
it's going
in
to be the
there.
most fucked up of the three of them. So.
Yeah.
All right, we're to number one. What do you got, Josh?
My number one, and this is a movie that I definitely can see maintaining its position here. It's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, from Kelly Freeman Craig, who is 2 for 2. And like Nicole Hall, I've seen her. I wish she made more movies more often. This is her first film since her debut, The Edge of 17, which I also really loved, which was also just an excellent, excellent coming of age story. And this is too. I mean, of course, it has the source material here that is a classic, the novel by Judy Blume. And it deals with a younger age character than Edge of 17 does, but it's so real and honest, and it's funny, and it captures so many things, not only that adolescent time period, but also the time period that it's set in. She keeps it in the 1970s, which is when the book was published. I feel like a lot of filmmakers would feel the pressure to update it somehow to the modern day, and I love that she didn't do that. I love also that this is a movie. I think the book has this reputation as being, because it's been challenged or banned in certain places because of its portrayal of puberty, which is a huge part of it and is about Margaret, the main character, played by Abby Ryder Fortson. She's 11 years old and she's dealing with changes in her body and getting her period, and all this stuff is a major, major part of it. But also a huge aspect of this film is her search for meaning in religion. And I think this is something that you rarely see, and certainly not with this level of nuance, in a Hollywood studio film. And the way that she explores that, the different faith traditions, the way that this movie is open to all of these different ideas, and dealing with the interfaith nature of her parents' marriage, Rachel McAdams and Benny Safdie, who play her parents, one who's Jewish and one who is not really religious anymore, but comes from this Christian background. And it's not providing you with easy answers, just like she doesn't find any easy answers in her quest. Also, Rachel McAdams is so good in this film as the mother. And one of the things that Kelly Freeman Craig does is expand on that character and give her her own arc and her own emotional journey as she, as a mother, deals with trying to support this child who is struggling and going through things that she herself can relate to, but also, can't fully, guide her child on, and is just trying to be there for her. And is just like the kind of mother that everyone wishes that they would have, I think, in this film. So it's just such a wonderful, beautiful movie. And this is a big studio movie. This might be the only like big studio movie that I have on my list. And it totally bombed at the box office, which is on the one hand, not surprising. On the other hand, is a real shame. And I hope it doesn't mean that it takes another 7 years for Kelly Freeman Craig to make a movie, because this is a movie that everyone should see.
I didn't realize it bombed at the box office. That sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't cost like what Guardians of the Galaxy cost, but I think even on that relatively modest scale, it did not do what it was meant to do.
That's a bummer, because it's great. I mean, it's one of those movies where it's like, I can't think of a single negative thing to say about it. Like, it is just really great, and I feel like everybody should see it. And I mean, it's really, really great, and it's a great pick for your number one here. And that's just a bummer, man. I'm bummed out now. But
well, I don't mind to bum you out, because it's a feel. I mean, there's struggles with the characters or whatever, but it is a feel good movie. It's a movie that ultimately is empowering and is about how you can go through this search for identity and find yourself. And it's a nice thing to see again, before you return to the horrors that are reality.
Yes, absolutely. Well, for my number one, like I said, if I was in the mood for, fucked up and weird, I would have picked Infinity Pool. But if I'm in the mood for just kick-ass awesome, I'm going with John Wick Chapter 4 from Chad Stahelski. I know you weren't that big of a fan of this one, Josh, but let me tell you, this movie is everything that I could have ever hoped for from the fourth chapter of this series, that has gotten progressively more insane, but also like beautifully made and also funny, and just the choreography is incredible, and all of the supporting characters are just fantastic additions, and they knocked this thing out of the park. And I know we are recording this just a couple weeks away from the new Mission Impossible movie, and there's no reason I should doubt that won't top it as far as action movies go this year, but I just don't really understand how that would even be possible, because this just seems like the high end of what is possible with an action film to me.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, one like the Fast and Furious movies where I feel like I don't understand the trajectory of responses to these films. I liked the first John Wick. I thought it was really good. And it seems like the reasons that I enjoyed that film are the opposite of what the filmmakers and audience seem to have taken into the sequels. That's a really simple, direct, lean kind of story. John Wick is mad that they stole his car and they killed his dog. He's getting revenge on this very specific small number of people who have directly wronged him. Mm-hmm. And it's got great action. It's really, really well staged and everything. It looks cool. And Keanu Reeves is great in that role. And it wraps up. It doesn't need a sequel. But when we get the sequel, I think, what they've doubled down on, and especially going into this film, which is so incredible, it's nearly 3 damn hours long.
Could have been longer.
Is this incredibly dense, Baroque, ridiculous mythology that they just keep adding to that makes absolutely no sense. And, everything goes from this relatable, like, in a certain sense. Yeah. But, you can understand his emotions. He's grieving his wife who's died. People understand grief. People understand being attached to their pets. And I think, part of it in that film is that it's an overreaction on his part. But because these emotions are so strong and he's an assassin, that's how he deals with them. And it's just gone so far away from any kind of emotion that you can understand, from any kind of story that makes any sense. It's become this elaborate, insane, essentially like sci-fi fantasy world.
Yeah.
And even the stunts, which are cool, I think because this movie is so long, and the stunts also then just go on and on and on and on. Each individual set piece is like 20 minutes long. I feel like I've lost any sense of wonder at these things anymore. They're doing the same kind of thing sort of monotonously. And it's like, it's cool at first. And then it's like, okay, all right, I get it. So I don't know. I'm in the minority on this. These movies continue to be highly, highly acclaimed. But for me, the high point was the first one, and then it's just gone steadily downhill since then.
Yeah, I've got a theory about why it has gotten so out of control with with the whole high table and all that stuff, and we'll see if things continue to go in that direction with spin-offs and whatnot. If what I'm thinking is correct, but maybe I'll share that on a podcast one of these days. But in the meantime, I hope that we get more of this stuff. I mean, obviously, where we leave things at this, I mean, it's really only open for spin-offs. But then again, anything's possible. So
Yeah, they've already said that they want to make another one, despite the way that this movie ends in what seems to be a fairly definitive way. I mean, we have the spinoffs coming, right? And I feel like, I don't know what your theory is, but I feel like to me, with what the spinoffs are, they're all just like expanding on the mythology. We have the prequel spinoff with the Continental, the hotel for assassins or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got the ballerina spinoff with the whole school for assassins. And it's all just more like digging into the elaborate mythology. It's not, to me, what would be a spinoff would just be like another revenge story that doesn't have anything to do with the mythology. And that's not where they're going at all.
Not at all. But I guess we'll see what happens. But let's get into some honorable mentions, and then we'll shout out some popcorn and puzzle pieces picks. Do you have anything that you wanted to specifically bring up?
Yeah, I have a couple. And like I said, I kind of struggled to get a lot of stuff here, but I did want to shout out Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. You asked what my favorite superhero movie is,
Sure.
and that's definitely it. Even though I'm not as over the top about this film as a lot of people seem to be, it is just gorgeous. It's also, I would say my favorite animated film this year. And it looks amazing. The visual creativity, the characters, the fact that this is a movie where 80% or so of the characters are essentially like the same person, they're all just Spider-Man, and yet they differentiate them really, really well. It is too long, and it does not end, like literally it just ends in the middle of a scene and they're like, to be continued. And it's like, come on, this is not a fucking TV show. And even if it was, like, you would have a better ending than this. So that's frustrating, but I did really enjoy that film as far as superhero movies go this year. And I also wanted to shout out Knock at the Cabin, the M. Night Shyamalan film, which I'm very back and forth on M. Night Shyamalan, but I feel like this is one of his better films, even though it does feature some of his weaknesses, especially the way I think that it ends does not really hold up. He didn't stick the landing on this, but Dave Bautista is so good and so creepy in this film. And the concept is super creepy, where this family is being told that the world will end unless they sacrifice one of their family members. And Shyamalan, this is a movie that largely just takes place in this cabin, and yet it's super creepy and unsettling just amongst these characters. And, Batista really just carries it. He's so good. I like Guardians of the Galaxy. He's fun in those, but this really showcases his acting. So those are my honorable mentions. They're not close really to the top 10 or anything, but enjoyable popcorn type movies that I had a good time with.
Right on. As far as I am concerned, I had written down 10 things. I'm not going to go through them all, but I will say from your list, I had Rye Lane, Sanctuary, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and Knock at the Cabin. So those were on my honorable mentions. Also, Mafia Mama, of course, I already mentioned as an honorable mention. Also, The Pope's Exorcist, which is a mixed bag, but as far as like that kind of hokey, kind of camp kind of thing for 2023, like that's it. Like the memes alone make that worth an honorable mention. Also, Inside with Willem Dafoe was a really unique and interesting film, even if it doesn't 100% work. I had a lot of fun with that. Also, Sisu, which is kind of another form of John Wick. That's one I wanted to include. And then my last honorable mention, the Dungeons and Dragons movie that was just a big surprise, fun film that didn't do very well whatsoever, probably because it looked terrible. But for people who watched it, for the most part, I think most people had a fun time with it.
Yeah, I had a fun time with that movie too. I did enjoy it, and it's a shame that it didn't do well, because it's the kind of IP driven film that we would want to see, because it really feels like it was created with love and care and actual enthusiasm and creativity from those filmmakers. Bunch of those others I did not see. Inside, Pope's Exorcist, Sisu. I have not seen any of those, but curious to see those. But I will say that if we were doing the top 10 worst movies of the year so far, Mafia Mama would definitely be on my list. I like halfway through that movie, I was like, I can't believe this exists. This is just so unbelievably terrible. It's like boggles my mind that people made this movie. It's just one of the worst things that I've seen in terms of like a mainstream, like wide theatrical release film. It is probably the worst of the year, I think.
That's the mark of a great movie to me, man. But go into the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group. Let's see what we got here. Paul Hibbard mentioned Past Lives, which of course was on both of our lists. Jason Harris, your awesome movie, your co-host, mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was on mine. Rick Ives mentioned the Super Mario Brothers movie, which, as a big Mario fan, I had fun with. I know critically it did not do well, but box office wise, the people spoke and they fucking loved it.
Yeah, the people have their choices. So I was waiting for that to be on your list. I remember Sonic the Hedgehog being at number 2 one year, so I thought it might end up on there.
Yeah, well, as much as I am more of a Mario guy than a Sonic guy, Sonic has better movies. What can I say? But right. Let's see. Joe Black brought up Fast 10 as his number 1, which I know you hate, but Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret as his number 2. So you never know with Joe.
Yeah,
so there you go.
So true of him.
Yeah, absolutely. He also brought up Polite Society, which was another one I was considering for my list, but didn't quite make it. But it's a fun movie.
Yeah, I like that as well.
Yeah. Patrick McElroy brought up Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Also, Beau is Afraid, which is a big movie that didn't make either of our lists. But, I liked, but I don't know if I quite loved it. He also brought up You Hurt My Feelings, which you loved, and Showing Up, which I haven't gotten a chance to see yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either, nor have I seen Beau is Afraid, actually. And I do like Ari Aster. I like Midsommar, and I like Hereditary a lot. And I know Beau is Afraid seems to have been kind of polarizing, but I'm definitely curious to see that. And Showing Up. I'm sort of back and forth too on Kelly Reichardt, but I would always be curious to see what she's doing. So both of those definitely on my list to watch at some point.
Me too. George Hannah Wilson brought up Blackberry. Your sister Brandy Bell brought up Blackberry, and also Rye Lane and Air, a movie that we covered here on the show.
Yeah.
Which was solid.
It
definitely
was.
something.
I agree. Yeah, it was a good one.
And then last but not least, our buddy Chad Clinton Freeman brought up Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. Guy Ritchie had 2 movies this year, and I didn't get a chance to see either of them. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think The Covenant was the one that got better reviews, but to me, Operation Fortune was better. Not that either one are particularly good. They're Guy Ritchie. They're kind of in his real, he's a solid mediocre filmmaker, I feel like. And The Covenant to me was like not exactly his strength because it's very, very, very serious. Right. And almost cartoonishly so, I think. And Operation Fortune is the opposite of that. And I had fun with it. Especially, I love Aubrey Plaza in that film where she's giving this performance where you're like, I don't know if this character is sarcastic or Aubrey Plaza is like sarcastically appearing in the film. But either way, it's fun to watch.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that does it for our Midway Top 10. Josh, what's going on over on Awesome Movie here?
What is going on? We are, I assume, still in our 1975 season. Yeah, there's plenty left to go. So definitely when this is out, we're in the midst of that, which has been really cool. Lots of really good films in 1975. Lots of iconic films that we're discussing there. So check us out at awesomemovieyear.com. At Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, and Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. And you can check out all of our episodes on our website, going back many, many years in film history. I think we're close to 200 episodes now, maybe on
Sounds about
awesome
right.
Movie Year.
Yeah.
My stuff you can see at joshbellhateseverything.com. I finally 6 months late posted my top first time watches of 2022 that we had done a podcast about. And so very, very sporadically updated website there, but all my other stuff posted on social media. Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Twitter, and at Signal Bleed on Letterboxd. And if you're in Vegas, you can catch me every Friday on the 11 a.m. KTNV Channel 13 News reviewing new movies.
Right on. Well, Josh, it's always great having you on these, and hopefully we'll get you back for a regular piecing it together again sometime soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Hi, this is Wax Trax Records here on 2909 South Decatur. We buy all your old 45s, your old albums, any type of music memorabilia. Also, we sell music memorabilia, albums, CDs, and a lot. Come on down to Wax Trax, 2909 South Decatur, or give me a call at 702-362-4300. Thank you very much.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Josh Bell about our favorite movies of 2023 so far. Let me know what your favorite movies of 2023 are so far. Get in touch with us on social media at PiecingPod or in our Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, or you could also contact me directly through the piecingpod.com website, especially if these social media sites all burn to the ground. That would be the way to do it. Also, get in touch with me if you ever want a guest on an episode of Piecing It Together. I'm always looking for new guests. I have a whole bunch of new people lined up for the next couple of months, but I'm always looking for new people to join me on this show. So please do get in touch. And, of course, make sure you're subscribed wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. If you really like the show, you can rate and review us either on Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, or Spotify. And you can check out the Produced by David Rosen Patreon that I told you about at the top of the show. Lots of great content on there. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. If you want to support the show that way, we'd appreciate it. So let's close this thing out with a piece of music like I always do. And, these top 10 list episodes, they're big episodes. So how about I give you a preview of some new music that I am working on? That'll be cool. I am working on a lot of new music for the new year, so you can look forward to that because I've got a whole bunch coming. But I'm not going to tell you what this song is called. I'm not even going to tell you if it's finished or not. I'm just going to pick something out of my folder here in my Dropbox where I put stuff that I'm currently working on. I'm going to pick a track. I'm going to throw it on this, and we'll close it out with that. So hope you enjoy this piece of music. We'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.